That's good. You know what I mean? The stock market has done very well under this administration so far.
And
Knock on
gold.
wood. Yeah, knock on wood. It's done well. Uh, he has had some policies which have helped some Americans. No tax on tips and overtime. No tax on overtime, which has been helpful. Um, and if you're into the immigration, he's basically stopped the influx of illegal immigration mostly. So those are some things that some people who are pro the administration say he's done a very good job. Where I'm looking at it, where I think he has totally ruined relationships with with solid countries where we had good relationships with, aka Canada and Europe,
Canada being the
uh,
prime one here.
Canada, Europe, etc. Uh, I think tariffs are net negative. He got us into an unneeded war, and yeah, amongst a couple other things, but and inflation hasn't really. I mean, let me rephrase it. Inflation was much worse under the previous administration. I don't think anybody will dispute that.
No.
But it's not currently at the 2%. I think we're hovering at about in the 3 to 4%. I mean, am I right, Dylan, or am I wrong?
Low threes. Yeah, yeah. Low threes has been the official number. I think the real number is probably closer to 5%, but I think the real number was a lot higher under the early administration than, the nine print was the one that was like, oh my God, that everyone freaked out about on that one, inflation print. The official one was nine. And I'm like, for example, I used to buy orange juice 10 years ago for $2. I can't buy it for I can't find it anywhere for less than like 350 for the same size orange juice. So 10 years they almost doubled.
Yeah, so especially
And
with
I buy orange juice regularly.
yeah, and that's why we're like now that have been the countries with high inflation, I don't know how those countries really end up doing it, to be honest with you. I really don't know how they must as soon as so a country like Venezuela or Cuba or whatever, they must as soon as they get the money either spend it on a good right away or they just deal with another currency. I don't know how. And we think Americans we have it bad at like, and we've seen it like, let's just say from the 3 to 8% or 9%, whatever it was under the last administration. I can't imagine it being like 20, 30, 40, 50% or more. Those really do big time harm on society. So anyway, kind of digress a little bit with that, but I think it is relevant because inflation has been really a hot button topic for the last, I would say, 4 to 6 years. Not six, no, 4 years.
No, not 6 years. No, no,
No,
no. It
not 6 years.
started
Just six
Biden.
years was
Yeah.
COVID. 6 years was COVID, and then that's when the money started going. But I'd say definitely for the last 4 years. But we haven't had an inflation kind of spike like this in the last 40 years, from my understanding.
Yeah, since the 80s. Yeah, I mean, Trump hasn't had a full pass on inflation, to be honest. I would say it should be under two to really be a full pass, like 100% score. More inflation is bad, your the bump at the grocery store and the gas pump is automatic, but your pay bump is not automatic. You
Right.
don't automatically get, or at least most companies don't automatically go up. Your pay doesn't go up with inflation. So like my pay during COVID was the same as my pay now. I haven't had a raise. So and a lot of people are in that situation. So like inflation, because of the way the pay and the way the prices are set and all that, inflation is kind of it's good if you have debt like real estate or whatever. You own a bunch of real estate, you want the inflation to inflate away the debt. So a lot of wealthy people like inflation, but if you're a blue collar guy, it's not your friend. You really, if you're looking for the blue collar the way Trump says he is, you really want inflation to be as low as possible. Sub 2% minimally, I would say, would be a passing grade for a president.
No question.
Trump obviously hasn't done that.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And for me,
I don't know if you want to speak on your side in terms of inflation and pay and all that. Like,
Oh,
are you getting
inflation just in
cost of
general?
living increases with your pay, or is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
like,
yeah. I mean, in general, I would say like with the cost of living, um, because I've been doing a little bit of traveling the last few years. I don't think it's just strictly an American thing, American phenomenon. I think it is happening globally,
yes,
especially amongst like food prices, etc. Because I hear the same problem. So
yeah, and you travel more internationally than me recently, so
yeah, I mean, so perhaps it's not necessarily just an American administration problem. Maybe it's a world problem where there's just too much assets going after too little stuff. That could be the issue. You know what I mean? There's too much fiat going after like physical stuff. So that
yeah.
could be it. It could be just that we just don't produce enough. We're just not producing enough of
People are
food.
still like, yeah, sleeping all day.
Yeah, yeah, no, for real. Like that could be it too. So just it may not just be political, but I guess what I'm going at is that it does make things a lot tougher for, if you expected basically since let's say the late 80s to the basically 2020, man, you could have a job and have stay at the same salary or maybe get a 2 or 3% bump in pay, still be okay and still feel pretty good.
Yeah.
But when inflation goes up like 8%, then 7%, then 5%, all within that, like those 4 year span, right? Of like the dollar losing like 25% of its value, basically 25% inflation in 4 years, like when you do the math, like now how many people are really having a 25% pay bump? You know what I
No
mean?
one on that I heard of, unless they switched to another job. Like I know my sister just got her degree a few years ago and got a much higher paying job, but that doesn't have anything to do with
Yeah, yeah.
inflation,
So,
president.
but again, I mean, had you had that money in the market, right? You would have 25, 25, 25. You would have ended up more than ahead.
Yeah, yeah, double
So
all your assets.
it's one of those things you need an asset, especially during inflation, which obviously grows. So I guess my own opinion on it, I guess my own opinion on it is that it's not the end of the world. You can survive under an inflation environment. You need to be a lot more savvy. But I try to tell this to my friends, loved ones, etc. Very difficult to work your way around it. I mean, I'm talking about working a job because you only have so many hours in a day, right, to work, and then you only get paid so much. Like nobody's gonna pay you, um, give you a 20. Very few companies give you a raise just based on inflation. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah,
Raise
yeah,
just
yeah. I
based
mean,
on
it does happen, but it's not common. I think I know like a few people, all the people I know and their work, the company automatically goes up with some sort of inflation idea, and these are generally the better paying jobs in my opinion. McDonald's is not giving you a 3% raise with inflation.
absolutely not. And the thing is that, and that's another thing. Like you can cut your expenses, but how many things can you cut? You know what I mean? You can only cut so much. Yeah, okay, you can maybe cut the entertainment. Maybe cut eating out, etc.
But then you're living on a van, basically, you're not paying rent.
Yeah. So I mean, so you kind of got to grow. So I'm always a big proponent of people who are always like, oh well, I can cut coupons and do all that stuff. That's good, but it's really a lot more beneficial if you grow your way out than if you try to cut your way out. Does that make sense?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, obviously you want to hit your income for sure. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, income or your net wealth growing. You know what I mean? For sure.
net
Uh,
worth growing. Yes.
um, so yeah, I mean, I guess what this is that I see the current administration as making a huge mistake in Iran right now because with the Strait of Hormuz, etc.
And I agree with that. So we have sort of a left
Yeah,
and what I would say, quote unquote, right,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
non-Trump voter, Trump voter. Let's put it that way.
exactly.
That are both agreeing that this Iran war is a total disaster for everyone in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a disaster, and I don't know how he can even get out of it right now. You know what I mean? It's going to be very difficult to kind of get out of it without Iran ended up being stronger than they were before the war started. Because before the war started, they were maybe working on a nuclear weapon, maybe, maybe not. Trump said he dismantled it in the summer. Apparently not. Um, so now they're going to control the Strait of Hormuz, and you know what I mean. And they're still going to want to produce nuclear weapons. So what'd you really do? Like, what'd you really accomplish? Not
Not
much.
much.
So you have that. Where Dylan and I definitely disagree on is the tariffs. I think tariffs are certainly inflationary and bad for society. Mostly, not only they're inflationary, they make other countries who may be friendly to you very angry. Like the Canadians, Europeans, etc. They're like, well, why are you tariffing us? Etc. You're hurting our economy. I thought we were your friends. So there's that factor in there too. No, I understand the other factor, what you're going to go into. I guess you could speak a little bit on why you like tariffs.
Yeah, absolutely. As a proponent, like first of all, I would say that the European Union has been tariffing us, as far as I know. So it's a little rich to have them complaining about being tariffed when they've been tariffing our goods. So it's a little or tariffing or banning, banning our meat and banning our cars and various other things. So it's a little hypocritical. It would be probably a good word to use. Wait, we're allowed to tariff you, but you're not allowed to tariff us. That's not cool. So there's that factor. The other thing to think about is that, and this is not really so much with Europe and Canada, but when you go to so the U.S. has high labor rates, and that's a known thing. If you pay a U.S. worker, it costs a lot more than paying, Chinese or Mexican or a Argentinian or whatever worker or Philippine. So there's always an incentive for businesses to send their labor parts away, and that's not good for the economy. So with the tariff system, that gives a sort of protection to have more labor in that country, to have a little sort of wall to kind of try to keep labor rates that sort of supports higher labor rates in the U.S., which is something that's been under attack, so to speak, for a while. So it helps with jobs essentially. And no one's arguing that it doesn't increase prices. Of course it does. The reason why American companies want tariffs, or at least non-international American companies want tariffs that aren't sending their labor out or whatever, is so that they have a better advantage compared to the foreigners coming into the U.S. market, which is the largest consumer market in the world. It's the one that everyone wants. Everyone wants, from China to South Africa to Australia. Everyone wants to get in the U.S. market because they spend so much money and they're huge. They buy like 40% of the goods sold on planet Earth. So everyone, that's the prize. So I think it's a good leverage to basically try and use that to support its own internal manufacturing. Obviously the U.S. used to be a huge manufacturing base, used to be the largest manufacturing base 100 years ago, by far. So it would be a way to sort of encourage the country to be self-sufficient, increase wages, or have increased wage pressure, especially with the immigration block. It's going to force the what they're paying per hour to pick cherries up. That means if I go pick cherries, I'm gonna get paid more now. If I get, if so. Anyways, those are all the arguments for it. You can go ahead and
Yeah, I mean, that's a couple. I mean, and I guess I could agree with you a little bit on those. Is that I think what you're saying is job preservation, right? That's
Yeah, job preservation, keeping an industrial base here in the U.S., self sufficiency, stuff like
Yeah, so
that.
protection of domestic industries, job
Yes.
preservation, yeah, and I would definitely say those are positives. And like I said, I mean, I said higher consumer. You agreed with it. Higher consumer
Of course,
prices.
we both agree that the negatives are negative. Meaning, when I go, like for example, with that deporting illegals and putting tariffs on tomatoes is going to increase because the labor cost going into tomatoes is going to be higher now. The farmer has to have his sons or students or whatever the hell pick, and he has to pay them more. That's then going to get passed on the consumer. So now tomatoes are costing more for me to buy. There's no argument that tariffs are not inflationary. It's very intuitive, and no one's arguing against that. And it's also very known that tariffs support. The question is the negative worse the positive, and that's the thing that's debatable.
Yeah, it's just, I think the biggest thing is that, companies have found a way to become the most efficient they could be, right? And throughout this, whatever it is, globalization, whatever you want to call it, the companies have figured out how to make products at the most efficient and best price they possibly can, right? So that's why they may send it over to China, and it gets over to Canada to be assembled and then sold in the US. I'm just making something up, out of the way, but the product gets moved worldwide. Um, and the product gets moved worldwide. Um, and normally when a company does that, right, there's a reason behind it because they've found efficiency in supply chain. So, for example, if you can't get your rare earths, we were just talking about this on the phone, in Canada or whatever, you're going to send it over to a company in China, get it done there, maybe have it shipped and done over there, and then have, I don't know, maybe the chips and NVIDIA made in the US, right, shipped over, instead of having it all compartmentalized, doing everything in the US, which would be inefficient, right? If you had to do every single thing in the US from, let's say you have to make your computer, whatever you're on. Just imagine if you had to do every single thing in the US. I mean, I think it would be possible, but how much more expensive and inefficient would that be? That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, you have a valid point, especially when you're arguing about a country like the Caribbean or something like that. If they were like to put up tariffs and be like, we will produce everything, we will produce cars, and you're like, there's just no way the Caribbean could be self-sufficient. The U.S. is in a pretty good state as a country, and we probably could do okay if we literally banned every single import and just. Now, there's a few things that are probably pretty non-negotiable, like we probably have to, potash or potash, however it's said, from Canada for fertilizer. I think that's pretty essential. I don't know if there's any workaround for that. I'm no expert, but from what I know, that's a pretty essential, thing that we need as Americans. The rare earths, we don't have a lot of supply of that. We obviously have a lot of oil. But there's a few things that the U.S. is lacking. I think we couldn't do it fully, but we could do it a lot, much more so than other countries. But obviously, a country like Italy or Caribbean or whatever, like Marshall Islands. Well, I guess the Marshall Islands is under the U.S., but especially smaller countries, it's virtually impossible for them to be fully self-sufficient. So, but I still think it's worth them, and obviously tons of countries do have tariffs. This is very common. It's just uncommon for the U.S. to be imposing tariffs. The majority of countries have tariffs. This is very common. You want to debate me on that? We can look it up.
Sure.
Let's see. 100. I believe there's 198 countries in the world. I believe like 75% of them have tariffs.
You mean on every single country? Hold on a second, because you on every single country or just against the U.S.?
No, they have tariffs in general, meaning they charge other countries to some degree, whether it's on 20% of the stuff that gets shipped into them, 100%.
Whatever. USA had tariffs too, but even before Trump, it's just they're doing a mass tariff on just basically on everything.
They had like the lowest, one of the lowest tariffs. It was like 2% was the average graded total tariff for the U.S.
But 2%. Most countries have just an aggregated 100% tariff on everything coming in. That's my question. Or is that what you're asking?
It's obviously a little more nuanced than that, but from what I understand, a typical tariff, like you go to ship in something in Argentina or Zimbabwe or something like that. Like I know that we were the company I was working for earlier was trying to ship books to Brazil. There is 100% tariff in Brazil to ship books. What do you think the tariff is to ship books in the U.S.?
Right now it's 12%. I think on everything.
I believe it's like some nominal percent. Maybe Trump changed that, but I think it's like under 5%. We could look that up right now. Do you want to look at the book tariff in terms of the U.S.? It's definitely
Um,
less than Brazil. Brazil is 100%, or at least it was a few years ago. Probably still is.
how much to ship just books?
No, like so if you produce books in one country, like so for example, the company I was working for, they were producing books in Brazil to ship them to the US because it was cheaper. But if they tried to send the books into Brazil, like produce them somewhere else, the tariff was 100%.
Mhm.
The year was like around 2006, 2005, right around that time period. It's probably still the same though.
Yeah, well, I think, well, I guess what I'm not against is I'm not totally against tariffs. I'm just against broad tariffs on everything. So, for example, 50% tariff on X country, period, which would mean 50% more on oil, 50% more on food, 50% more on whatever, right? Normally, tariffs are handpicked for specific industries, I think, until Trump kind of did his broad range thing. That's kind of more my argument. That makes
Yeah, I'm
sense?
just looking at this. It says almost every single country imposes tariffs on imports.
But broad tariffs, though. On everything?
Yeah, broad. Well, at least it's not really differentiating that here, but it says mostly poorer countries, such as Algeria, will have like an average 90%, as opposed to like an Australia and Iceland that have like a 3% tariff. You know what I mean? Meaning the U.S. being one of the most
That's what I'm talking about. A blanket
and
tariff.
yeah.
So ask do
Oh,
ask ask which countries have blanket tariffs.
oh, okay, sure.
That's a better one. Because yeah, of course. I mean, you're gonna have tariffs on stuff. You know what I mean? Milk and stuff. You know, obviously you're gonna have something. But from my
Yeah,
understanding is that U.S. is putting a blanket tariff on everything. So it's like
and you're saying
12.5.
that's unusual compared to.
I do. I don't have any evidence for that, but I'm pretty sure.
Do most countries impose? I would say yes, but let's see. Impose a blanket tariff on imports. I think that's a pretty good way of answering the question. Let's see. Hello? Still thinking. Okay. Oh no, you're right.
Yeah. So look, I'm
Yeah,
not
you're
saying
right. It doesn't
tariffs are.
say, it says not a blanket rate. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that Trump put a blanket. From my understanding, you can look it up. Trump put a
Yeah, no, he
blanket
did do
rate.
a blanket. You blanket like all steel, all whatever. Yeah.
Or whatever. You know what I mean? Now he did kind of say like, okay, nothing on gold, nothing on, of course, oil, and he picked up a few little things like that, which of course were the inflationary things. But
The ones that people
yeah,
are complaining
so
about
I
the
guess what
most.
I'm talking about. So let me kind of reel in my point was that yes, tariffs are good for protecting particular industries you may want to protect, but a blanket tariff just based on 12.5% on just everything coming in, I think is a bad, not good.
Yeah,
That's
you're
that's
right,
what.
and I was wrong on that because that's apparently not typical. There's various other. I thought that was typical, but it's not according to what the AI I just looked at.
Yeah. So I guess let me ask you this: are you for blanket tariffs or not? Blanket.
I am. Yeah,
You're
although
for blanket.
now I'm starting to think if other countries don't do it, it's not common. I'm not certain that that's the best way to go about it. But because of the fact that the U.S. is a big market and the market that everyone wants to go to, I would say that we have that negotiating leverage, so to speak, to try and keep wages up here and keep companies from sending labor to other countries. So I think that's it's. I would support a law that had a blanket tariff, like 10%. Everything comes in the country gets tariffed. I think that would be a good thing.
So
to give the domestic industry an edge despite the higher wages you need to pay and the health care and all that.
But what about stuff that we consume and we need? So, for example, you can't get mangoes or can't get bananas or whatever. You wouldn't. See, this is just my own common sense. Like, I would not tariff those things where you actually look. You can't.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's a valid point. Yeah, like the potash that Canada is sending.
Potash, bananas, coffee.
Or like the mangoes, or like the rare earths, because we don't have a lot of rare earths here.
Why
Yeah,
would
you're
you
right. That's a
tariff?
good point. That makes sense. I could agree with that. Not so. Yeah, I guess there would be carve outs for blanket tariffs.
Yeah, or even get. Why would you do that for oil or whatever? Why would you? I mean, especially if you
I mean, when I encourage the American oil, I don't know if the labor is the main part of. I think the labor is really a small part of the cost per barrel in the oil industry. So I don't think it's because it's pretty universal, whatever country, whether it's a poor country or a rich country. I believe that
That's
the
what I'm
oil.
saying. If the costs are universal, like you said, why would you add an additional 10% if you didn't have to? Why would you charge more?
Well, to encourage internal production, but yeah, I don't know that. I don't know that argument is a little more tenuous in that situation.
Yeah, because I think it'd already be. Why wouldn't? Oh, I see what you're saying. So maybe it's like. So then why wouldn't? So then why stop at 10? Why not do 30, 40?
I mean, you could, but like, you're right.
You know what I
You're
mean?
right.
You know what I
I
mean?
would say that the downside of tariffs, like let's say there was 100% or let's say there was a 90%. So whatever, let's say someone was going to send a book from Ireland. They printed a book from Ireland and they sent it to the U.S. to get sold, and there was a 90% tariff. So like they were selling it for $20, and they need to right when they goes on the ship, they need to pay $19 or $18 in tariffs to the U.S. in order to sell it. Of course, it's not going to make sense for them to sell it unless they could sell it for 40. But anyone who, in that case, they would just send an order to a U.S. manufacturer of books, and they would print it here to avoid that massive tariff. So, if you had a 90% tariff, I think the problem with that is that's going to make the local industry lazy. Like they're going to be like they're going to get so much work automatically, and they're not going to be as like hungry as the
Oh, that's a good point.
guys.
I didn't even think about that. That is a negative for tariffs. It makes you less innovative, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a valid, legitimate argument because it has historical precedence with tariffs, and that does happen and is not uncommon. The problem is our labor wages are higher than a lot of places in the world, so I feel like we need to do something to support like countries from automatically exporting labor out of the U.S.
I see what you're saying. No,
Yes.
I would somewhat agree. You want to keep the labor. You want to keep the labor high in the U.S.
You want an incentive. So, like, if you're Ford or you're Apple or you're whoever you are, you want an incentive for them to keep the work. It may not be enough. Maybe they're still going to send it to China or to Mexico or to, Taiwan or whatever. But you want to give them a reason to be like, well, I have to pay this fee. I have to literally, out of my checking account, before I even give it to the customer and take money from him, I have to cough up the dough as it goes across the border in the truck or the ship and pay. And that's fucking annoying. Excuse my French. Bleep that out, babe.
Yeah.
That's annoying. Is there any way you can do it here for the same price, or at least close to the same price? I feel like that's like me and my friend were actually recently looking at manufacturing something, and we automatically thought, let's go get made in Mexico because it's too expensive to get made here. And that's not good. If you automatically think like, wow, like I'm gonna start a business, let's get all the labor shipped out somewhere else. Like that's not good for the country's economy that labor is automatically exported.
I understand. Okay,
Yeah.
I gotta buy that a little bit. But you did bring up a point I didn't even think about, is that it will make countries lazy to innovate. You know what I mean? Because then what if China's got their closed system and they've just got a better car than us? You know what I mean? You don't want that imported into the U.S., or you don't want U.S. people driving a better car? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, no. Well, the thing, so like with the Chinese example, I would allow the Chinese cars into the U.S. market. I don't think they're allowed right now, currently. I would allow them, but I would impose a tariff on them to give the U.S. Car manufacturers an edge. Not much. Like maybe they don't have slave labor, maybe they don't have like zero cost of innovation because they stole it from whoever. But at least it gives them some kind of edge that when the Chinese one comes off the boat, they have to cough up $1,000 or whatever their cost is for the tariff before they even get sold. They got to pay the U.S. government, and that's a disadvantage compared to Ford that can roll them off the factory, put them on a lot, sell them, boom, and they get the money in their pocket. So I feel like you don't want to block them from coming to the U.S., which I feel like they have been. I haven't seen one Chinese car here. I feel like it should come to the U.S. I feel like they should be. Welcome is probably the wrong word, but allowed here, and they should be tariffed.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Hmm. So you're not totally against imports at all.
No,
You're not against imports. You're just pro tariff.
I mean I'm fairly free market. The problem that Trump I felt like he was legitimately bringing up was that with the labor imbalance and various other things, the labor rates being higher here, basically. A problem with that is I don't feel that's sustainable because then all of manufacturing is going to leave the U.S. and we're going to be solely consumers. I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can say, well, we're producing digital stuff and we're producing, designs and blueprints and engineering and like higher level stuff. But I'm like, I'm not really buying that. Like the U.S. in 20 years with no manufacturing plants, all just doing like, I feel like that's a bad place to be in.
Yeah, probably. Well, we
Yeah.
got less than a minute left. This has been going really quick. This went really, really quick.
It has been.
way quicker. I get I guess we expanded on a lot of stuff. So any final words? I guess I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is to tie it into the financials. How do you make money on this? Basically, how do you manage your finances? And I think you just need to be aware of the political situation to know how it's going to affect your finances. I think it's important.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And we thank you for the audience. We did a little different today and have a great day.